There is nothing wrong with your radio.
Do not attempt to adjust the volume.
We are controlling the broadcast.
For the next hour we will control all that you hear.
You are about to experience the knowledge and insights of the Media Mothership.
All right, you're listening to Media Mothership on 99.3 FM, and it looks like everything's green-lit now, so I've taken control of the station for the next 50 minutes. I'm Craig, who'll be the host of the show, as I've been for the last 103 episodes, joined by my co-host Taylor.
Hello.
And special guest all the way from UTAS.
All the way from
Sandy Bay,
upstairs.
PhD candidate from the School of Humanities, majoring in history, Evelyn Lambeth.
Hello.
Hello, fantastic. So I did grab Evelyn so I could unleash her research onto the Hobart airwaves through Edge Radio, as well as we're streaming on YouTube and Twitch. So you can jump on that Twitch if you want to see us live in person by just going to Media Mothership. And we're going to explore her research that's in its third year, looking at issues around, pigs. I've written your title somewhere. Somewhere. But you're here in the flesh for you to tell our audience what your project is. What's the title of your thesis or your research at the moment?
The title of my thesis as it stands, I can change it later if I want. We'll see how we go. It's called Pork Problems, Cultural Attitudes Towards Pigs Through History and the Effects on Modern Food Safety in Australia.
So it's, as you're within the area of history, it's taking a very broad, long historical view of controversially titled Pork Problems. So it's already kind of, I guess, flagging concerns, some more than likely myths that I have, that you have, Taylor, that probably a lot of people in the audience. Do you eat pork?
A little bit, yeah.
I eat pork. Evelyn?
Do I eat pork? I do.
Yeah. The first thing to say, and it's just my own curiosity about the naming of English, how English names things. So we've got pigs, and then we've got pork. Now, what's the connection between pigs and pork? Why do we call it pork and not something like pig meat or...
How appetizing does pig meat sound to you? Do you want to go get some pig meat from the store?
I think it's one of my it's this historical curiosity. So what's because I know that, I mean, for me, one of the surprising things about animals has been that moment where England was, what was it, the 1066 invasion of Normandy, and suddenly all these French words ended up. So you've got mutton and beef, and this kind of historical curiosity of the language used to name those changes. Did that happen with pigs? And pork?
Absolutely. There's lots of theorists that go into this. Probably one of the more famous ones be Carol Adams, but she talks about it as the absent referent. So just removing yourself from the animal makes it feel more holistic to eat. You feel further removed from the animal if you say I'm eating bacon versus I'm eating a backstrap off of this cute little pig.
And that... Okay, so that's opened up a couple of things. But the first thing, this historical curiosity. So much like my weirdness about why we name the thing we're eating something else, have you come across any surprising historical facts as you've been researching pigs in Australia? Is there top 5 surprises, top 10 surprises, top 25 surprises?
Wow. Oh, my. Yeah, I think about pigs all the time. Maybe I'm interested in the legacy of pigs. I hope you can tell from my accent, I'm an immigrant. I was born in Louisiana. So when I immigrated about 8 years ago, obviously I was really interested in why Australians don't really eat kangaroo or wallaby.
No.
In my mind, that would be a really good source of protein. So of course I wrote my thesis about that, my undergraduate thesis about that.
Why don't we eat... Oh, sorry, I'm really curious now. Why don't I eat them?
Have you ever eaten them?
Yeah, I went to a really expensive restaurant once, and they served kangaroo, I reckon. I plucked it out, man.
You can get Roo burgers at just Woolworth.
Yeah, I don't, though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What's going on there?
I argued, I wrote a paper about it. It's published in Gastronomica. if you wanna-
Gastronomica?
And there's a
Great name
podcast
for a
version
journal.
of it.
Really?
Heritage Radio Network.
Gastronomica Heritage Radio Network. Check it out.
Check it out. But my argument is that it's an emblem animal, so it was marketed out of our conscious ability to eat it.
By emblem, is
That's
that
why
like...
Americans don't eat eagles.
I'd say there's more reasons than that. There's like not much meat on an eagle.
But of course, there's policy and game law and lots of mechanisms that protect certain animals for consumption, i.e. beef and mutton in Australia.
Is it because it's like we have our coat of arms emblem, so there's literally an emblem that features our animals. I don't need anything that's on our emblem either. Emu. Yeah, but it seems like a squandering of resources, right? It does end up in a food chain, I imagine, in terms of animal cat food, right? Dog food. That's where it ends up in this lower food chain.
Absolutely. And yeah, a little bit in the human consumption market. And we export it as well.
So is there a human export market for it?
Yeah.
So, right. Who eats it overseas?
Lots of Southeast Asian countries. We ship a lot of bones there as well.
And that
tenuous
would promote
California.
Right. Oh, right. And there'd be all this language around the nutritional benefits, that this is great food. So it's interesting, yeah, the domestic market isn't engaged with it as well.
So we ship bones. Is that for like making stocks and stuff like that? Okay. Yeah.
Do you eat native animals?
Yeah, I think the best way forward, honestly, there's no right or wrong, and it's going to be a multifaceted way forward, but you should eat according to the land. I think everyone should be kangatarians.
Koalas.
Oh, that's kangatarians, though.
I did
love
not
that
coin
phrase.
that term, but I don't know who did, but
Koalatarians,
it's a good one.
kangatarians. Because you've got vegetarians. That's the only atarian I know. I love the idea of kangatarians.
It's not omnivarians, omnivores.
Omnivores, yeah. No. That's mind-blowing. All right, so you started, that was your honours thesis, was it? Or a previous paper and research?
Oh,
life?
yeah, that was my honors thesis.
Wow.
We're still talking about the pig. Gosh.
Well, we're getting around to the pig. You just blew my mind in terms of posing a question that I've not asked myself. And I got to admit, part of it would be psychological, just feeling like, I'm such a creature of habit that I'm just eating my cow and the pig, and to see, like, it has to be on sale. It has to be pretty heavily discounted, and thinking, okay, well, that's a good value thing. It's fascinating because there's wallabies. Anyway. So, surprising historical facts. Okay, cultural shift. Oh, here we go. So the next area. So, in that case, if we're looking at changes to people's attitudes towards meat, that's an example, I guess, of Australian attitudes towards its indigenous animals that are not changing. The title is, what is it? Pork problems. All right. So there's attitude issues towards pork. What's the history of that? What is that pork problem over time issue you're unpacking?
So studying native animal, I then wanted to look at a domesticated species. And I sort of compared wallaby and cow consumption. So I knew a lot about the beef industry, but less about pigs. So they seemed a natural choice. And I guess going back to facts that are surprising, some of the statistics argue that we have close to 23.5 million wild pigs in Australia. So
really?
Almost
Wow.
more pigs than humans. And yet, if you asked the average Australian if they eat pork, they'd probably say no.
Okay. First point is, I guess there's a lot of wild pigs, and those are wild pigs, right? Are we talking like tusks and fur, like razorback?
Oof. It depends how long they've been in the wild. Pigs are really interesting. They're really adaptable. Of course, they're very destructive too, especially to...
Because they're truffle finders as well, right? They get their snout and everything, and they'll just root around, which is great for like finding truffles, but pretty damaging for flora and
Fragile
fauna.
ecosystem.
And they like eating everything, don't they?
They
pretty
do.
much?
They're omnivores. They eat everything. But they, really adaptable. So all the wild pigs in Australia obviously were escaped from domestic pigs because they are not
Would have
native
been-
to this.
And they came here on the ships. Right?
ships.
The ships.
Pick a ship, any ship. Probably a pig
I
on
assume
it.
all ships have them on them. It's
Yeah,
like,
whether they're
"Ah."
in barrels or whether they're running around.
That's right. How many? Anyway, the colonial time. We're talking the English invasion, colonization of Australia. Part of the species they're going to introduce into Australia were pigs. Right,
Absolutely. Arguably before that too, you had French, Dutch, Chinese
Right.
merchant ships. We had pigs earlier, but I chose to start with the Captain Cookers, which is what the pigs were called.
Really?
Cook had a really prolific habit of like leaving pigs to breed wherever he left so that you could come back and have food.
And are they one of the species that's able to do that really easily? Like if you just leave a couple of pigs there and then you come back on your next voyage in a few years' time, you'll have, a decent pig population that you're going to be able to harvest and...
Absolutely.
Really?
Adaptable, and they're extremely, what's the word? Fertile.
Fertile. Is that unusual in introduced species? Do some species not become fertile as soon as
Pandas.
Pandas, yeah, okay. Horses, right? I imagine the Chinese colonialism and operation never existed. In terms of the British East India level, it'd be funny if they were trying to introduce pandas as part of their food source space. That's a tangent. But yeah, in terms of you got chickens, you got your pigs, you got your cows. I mean, pigs, though, have you found that pigs are particularly good at kind of leaving somewhere and...
They are particularly good. Of course, it's contingent on many things, the ecosystem, temperature. We think of the pig, but before the species of pig brought to Australia was a very specific pig.
What date is that? That's the 18 Australian history. My history teacher hates me now. 200 years. How old is... When did
Why are you
the
pointing
Captain
at me?
Cook...
I don't know anything.
You've got your phone there. ChatGPT it, bro. When did Captain Cook come to Australia, my American guest, to...
Sailed the ocean sea. Oh, wait, that's Columbus. 1788.
1788. So pretty much from 1788 on, we had the British ones. As you're saying before, Dutch, French colonizers had been also doing Spanish, had been doing the same thing. So, yeah, there's various fluctuations. But pretty much, yeah, that was introduced then, 1788.
That was introduced then. And the breed was specific to a Chinese breed, actually. The history of the East India Company and trade with China is really specific, but the port where they were trading pigs, they wanted pigs that could fatten more quickly because the wild pig is very lean.
So previous to that, you had a European British pig that was like a boar or something, like it was like furry, long legs or something, and
far from the ground. Yeah. Tusks. They subsisted mostly on like pannage. They would just roam wherever they go, eat nuts, acorns. They were, their value is in their ability to feed themselves.
Yep. Yeah, and so here we have a case of that industry wanting to genetically breed what they wanted. Right, which was more meat, something that would have more meat on it, would be less intelligent?
More fat, actually, at
more
the time.
fat.
They liked the lard. The lard was useful
Yeah.
to make
Right.
things like candles, and, they were using every part of the pig, quite literally.
Yeah, so you were showing me what was the website called?
Everything but the oink.
Everything But the Oink. So everyone check that out, Everything But the Oink. And it's going into this idea of how we make use of animals. And there's some fantastic information about pigs on there. And that's been baked into the pig, or human engagement with the pig, early on, right? That genetically getting this Chinese... What's the story about the Chinese pigs? So how did they arrive at that being the best pig?
Sorry, just so I understand your question, you're asking how the English got to that specific breed, or how the Chinese
so
got to
you
that
had
specific breed?
I guess the the East Asia Trading Company. And how did they find the Chinese pig? What was that history of colonization?
Ooh, that big and broad. The pig is actually from a really specific region called the Guangdong region, and it was based on a period of trade for 60 years because most of the other ports were closed. There was a war. You have the Opium Wars. You have different sort of things that affected which species were allowed to leave based on who was allowed access to whatever given region. But
then they found this pig.
Yeah, they found the pig. And Chinese pigs.
And is it like the pig that we know? Like it's the pig.
Chinese pigs had been much bigger, smaller to the ground. They'd been cohabitating with them for much longer than European civilizations.
Wow. And so that's the pig that then became this colonizing force along with the European powers. And that's the one that was then introduced into Australia. So many of the wild pigs are that type?
And particularly British pigs bad. The Dutch have their own breeds of pig. The French have their own breeds of pig. There's still other breeds of pig out there, but the one that is prolific in Australia was the British Chinese mix. So,
this kind of cultural shift, what's the cultural shift around our attitudes towards pork consumption then? I feel it's always been part of my diet, but has historically been the case? It's being used as a kind of handy resource for fat and meat. It seems like the attitude's been positive in terms of its exploitability, but am I missing something here?
Yeah, that's part of what made this research quite difficult. As an historian, my methodology, I deal with a lot of archives, I read a lot, and where you find pigs in the literature, they're often combined with livestock, whereas like mutton or beef are counted, so cows and sheep are counted individually. It's much less the case with pigs. You do get some statistical analyses of them, but it forced me to then think through who's eating the pigs if we're not exporting them? Because Australia really, when it was a colony, all of the money came into gold, wheat, and then eventually mutton once refrigeration and things came out for export commodities.
And that's sheep.
Sheep.
I struggle with words.
Oh, sheep and mutton, they are different. Lamb, yeah, it's because I didn't grow up with sheep.
That's all right. No, lamb is mutton, right? And sheep is...
What?
Sheep,
no,
you
sheep
only
is
really...
mutton.
Lamb is lamb.
Lamb is lamb.
I don't know, man.
Wool
English.
is sheep, right? Wool is sheep.
Well, and so yes, the in terms of the romanticism, I guess, around food stock or livestock, sheep were really Australia was living off the sheep's back, I think is the phrase. It was and the whole romance around sheep shearers, and then you've got drovers for cattle, and they're kind of cowboys. So you've got all these romantic associations of attitude towards these livestock animals. Yeah, pigs are there as well in Australia, but they don't have any romance. Saying you're a farmer for pig is well, I haven't seen the Man from Snowy Pig Place. Right? It doesn't... I'm trying.
Absolutely too. But so just...
Until Babe. Until
Babe.
Yeah.
My, what is it? My grandfather's brother is in Babe.
Wait, so your grandfather's brother, your great uncle.
My great uncle, yeah.
Wow.
Cool. Wow.
Yeah, he's the bad guy. No?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought you were about to say he's Babe.
He's the pig. Oh, okay. Because it's interesting, isn't it? In terms of media representations, trying to think of attitudes towards animals and pigs in particular. I guess while I can talk about it as it's always been there in the supermarket, and I've not felt any real, kind of reluctance in terms of choosing it over. Much more easily than kangaroo. Nevertheless, yeah, there are negative associations towards the type of cleanliness of a pig and the type of industry around it, right? It's not considered glamorous in terms of the past history, like your Memphis Snowy River with cattle, and your shearers. Like there's a couple of Australian movies that are all about sheep shearing. So is this also part of, I mean, the struggle that attitudes have towards pigs? They're just...
Yeah, there's a large tabooness, almost a demonizing of them as a species. But historically, like, if you read the convict documents about why people were shipped to Australia, oftentimes it was for pig stealing. Like, people would be sentenced for life for pig stealing. They were
In Britain.
In Britain. And so they get here and they're raising pigs again in the prisons.
Right. And there was a lot of pig stealing in Britain because they were animals that could be grabbed reasonably easily, I imagine, right? They're going to be in pens.
Not really at that point. In the early to mid 19th century, there was a lot of starving, big mass movements into urban areas. Pigs can have anywhere from 11 to 18 piglets per litter. So when they're babies, they run wild. You could just like let a pig fatten itself up and then snatch one off the street and bring it to market.
Oh, right.
But, you know, domesticated animals are property. So if someone could...
There'd be branding or something going on. And okay, so...
or hearsay.
Right. So there'd be a lot of convicts, or some convicts would have been brought down here to Australia, Van Diemen's Land. Even in like Port Arthur, we'd have some pig...
Oh, yeah, pig pens.
Action.
Yeah.
They made a lot of shoes in Port Arthur and Van Diemen's Land. And
Pig
pig
shoes.
skin. Pig skin would be the...
Right.
In the back of the shoe, where that soft bit is. Pig leather.
Great. So quite a nice, so that leather can be used. And that's gone out of style, right? Pig leather is not really a thing anymore.
Oh, it's still a thing.
Oh, it is?
Yep.
Where can I get it?
It's really soft, and historically wasn't used as much as other leathers, because if you think about toothbrushes, for instance, the bristles, that's about how thick a boar hair is, right? So
Yep.
pig bristles were historically used in toothbrushes.
Really?
The holes in the skin are quite porous.
Right. So toothbrushes used the bristles from, or their bristles were from boars. And...
Boars, yeah.
Really?
I mean, camels too. There were other species used, but the ones...
Snake.
That's not snake.
No, snakes don't have fur. Not that I know. Maybe they do.
You and your snake interests worries me.
Yeah. Interesting, though. There was an Operation Pig Bristle. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it was Operation Pig Bristle. After World War II, we also used them in paintbrushes. But after World War II, when the soldier-settler scheme was happening, the second one, soldiers would get homes and farms. They really went into the dairy industry to try and cultivate a market after the war. But we didn't have any paintbrushes because they're also used to paint the war machine. So, like, U.S. imports of paintbrushes were wild. Australian imports, so we ran out and we like literally forced our way into Hong Kong, into Chongqing to go and get pig bristles.
Wow. So the need to secure that resource resulted in a military operation.
Exactly. And I think it goes to show how diverse pigs are. The pigs in Australia were domesticated to the point that they didn't grow bristles that were useful for the kind of operation they were intended for.
That's crazy. That's one of those kind of scientific butterfly effects, something rippling to have causal effects on something else that you'd not at all imagine. That right. Okay. So so the use of that's no longer the case, I imagine. There's like plastic bristles that we use. Or...
Once nylon came into the mix, you had more nylon bristles. But pig bristles are definitely still used. A lot of times in shaving brushes because they're soft. Badger brushes, badger fur is still really useful.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Another interesting aside that was related to Captain Cookers. So when he would just leave pigs all over the place, he left some on Auckland Island, and that's in New Zealand, not Australia. It's still the same species of pig, but the difference was on Auckland Island, there's no humans that live on Auckland Island. It's just a really rugged, lot of different animals, native animals, but the pigs are really destructive on that island, but they've also adapted to be like a really robust, it's hard conditions there.
Wow.
But we used to use a lot of pig insulin for diabetes treating. And in the 60s when, globalization had been a thing for a long time by that point, but there was a mutation in the genetics of insulin around the world. And because, we crossbred and purebred so many things, most of the pigs around the world had this genetic mutation, so we couldn't use the insulin on humans. But on Auckland Island, there was this whole strategy of like, we gotta kill the pests. But then a scientist was like, oh, let's just check them. Let's quarantine one and see what happens. And it was the only insulin that we could use for humans at the time. It went from being a pest species to a $300,000 sow overnight.
Isn't that fascinating that suddenly it can turn so dramatically as the opposite, right? This waste kind of pest species suddenly turned to, thank goodness we didn't eradicate them. Wow, that's so. This was only reasonably recently in history.
They're still there.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just really expensive to quarantine them. So yeah, they're big animals. Yeah.
So you were talking there about, I guess, earlier on the role that colonialism played in shaping our perception of pigs, that I guess as a resource, a thing to be exploited. Is that still the case today? Is there still that same kind of British colonial attitude towards this as simply a resource, or has that changed, or are we still, basically perpetuating these British colonial myths?
Yes, I would say it's gotten worse.
Really? See, I just have this view of history always being better. Okay, so that might be a little wrong. But I was kind of expecting, no, the industry's cleaned itself up. It's really good. But no, there's still some... Okay, let's break it down. I think more than anything, globalization has commodified animals even more. Trying to find the baseline to make things as cost effective. Australia still imports 60% of its pork from Denmark and the US mostly. And so I guess what I've trying to get people to look at in my research is it does matter what happens in Australia with pigs, but it also matters how pigs enter the country and what form, and then also the conditions where the pigs are raised, where they're coming from. Still complicit. Some of those conditions are horrific. The conditions here are also horrific. But yeah, I guess where beef and wheat are, I was thinking about this when I was writing today. If we lost the cow, the kangaroo, or the pig in the social imaginary in Australia, like which one would be missed the most? Yeah.
Do you have an answer?
It's an interesting question, because you can see the reality of it. The mad cow disease strikes and suddenly beef is completely eradicated. So the question was, which of the what was it? It was... The
cow, the pig, and the wallaby, or the kangaroo.
Oh, okay. Which one would be the most devastating in terms of our cultural imaginary and sense of economic quality of life?
Well-being.
Well, yeah, the cow, right? Because where's my Macca's Big Mac? Yes. I mean, it just, that would be the obvious.
We do. Australians do have to abbreviate everything.
That's right. It's not McDonald's. Macca's. It's a bikie. It's not a biker. And yeah. Sorry.
Is there any reason why chicken wasn't on that list? Because I would say that's probably, of all the people that I know, mostly eat chicken.
Yeah, the crisis with eggs at the moment.
It's just because it's my own fault. I just made the question up myself.
Okay.
Maybe it's because I'm aware that there's a chicken shortage right now. Yeah, chickens are interesting, but so if you go to Kangaroo Island on the southwest or southeast of Australia, the the breeds that we consume the flesh of are not the same breeds that we consume the eggs of. So the ones we consume the eggs of have a life and then they're culled, their meat's wasted. There's different broiler chickens that are raised for food consumption. But yeah,
And that's on Kangaroo Island.
Yeah.
So is there, like, kangaroos on Chicken Island then?
Oh, jeez.
Probably, to be honest. There's Pig Island. Yeah. If you follow the pig, it really goes.
Oh, right, so there
There's
are-
a Pig Island, yeah.
I assume it has a lot of pigs.
Yeah, it's in the Pacific Islands and it has a lot of pigs.
So again, it's
We're
one of-
really,
it's been bequeathed. It's one of those little islands that was bequeathed a lot of pigs as a key stop-off point for the Spanish and the French and the British.
eating all your turtles, you could go get
Turtles.
a pig.
Yeah, what is it about turtles being the most delicious flesh ever that's been eaten? I've heard that story said, and
Well, I think if you were starving on a ship for 6 months,
yeah,
anything would be
tasty.
delicious.
It just seems crazy. Yeah, it was in IQ. Stephen Fry was talking about how, turtle meat they had to prohibit, and they were trying to bring them back for scientific curiosities, but they'd be eaten by the time they get there by the crew.
Have you ever heard of that French dish, which is said to be the most sort of like purest form of gluttony ever?
That's something within something within something.
No. It's a songbird,
Oh, okay.
and they drown it in
Yeah,
whiskey, so the whiskey enters the lungs,
Yeah.
and then you eat the whole thing whole, and all of its bones stick into your mouth, and the blood rushing out of your own mouth is the major
really?
part of the flavour profile
You've looked into
of the
that
dish.
Way
It was
deeper.
Henry VIII's favourite dish.
That doesn't surprise me
Yeah.
about him. Yeah.
I mean, it does speak to the attitudes towards an animal that you're willing to convert it into a torturous form of pleasure in a way. It's
Have you eaten it?
Of course not.
it's super expensive.
Yeah. On that note, there. I guess goes back to your question of had things gotten better, and I think this has been done for a while. But I think the amount of information and how quickly it's shareable now is maybe just illuminating things more than shaping new technologies. But one of them, there's something called gonadotropin, which is a
Gonadotropin.
gonadotropin. It's a hormone-based product from horse blood. So there's
Right.
wild horse farms. They're only legal for this production. We have horse farms all over the world because horse blood is really useful for estrogen treatment, many hormone therapies. But in terms of food production, the only 3 countries that allow it are Uruguay, Iceland, and Argentina. So they let the horses run wild, get the mare pregnant, take 5 liters of her serum every week while she's pregnant, ship it to piggeries, introduce it into the sow just after she gives birth because she can
Horse
re-enter
blood
estrus
into the-
immediately. And then they introduce it into the baby sows, the baby piglets, because they can enter puberty much earlier. And then they abort the fetus,
Really?
get it pregnant again, and it's the conditions for the horses are horrible because it's a hormone, so it doesn't matter about the size of the animal. It's a concentration of blood.
Holy cow.
Holy horse.
Holy
Oh,
horse.
horse, yeah. So, I mean, this brings this question of, I guess, food safety and sustainability. Are there things we should be concerned about that you've found in your research around some of these concerns around pork in Australia?
Absolutely. I think
That's not happening in Australia, though, the blood being introduced?
Well, we're importing the pork, so it depends how you consider it. Yeah.
Right.
Thought you got
We're
off.
complicit.
Dang. Yeah, I think I've been thinking a lot about what I hope to do with this research, and I don't want to scare people away. A lot of people are never going to read my thesis, but it's like
Well, we could do an audio book on it.
where I see the biggest availability to make impact would be if we center the human, because I think it's much harder. People be like, I'll be a vegetarian, and even if I tell them all the things that they assume, well, it's still better than eating meat, and you go, okay. So, but if we are going to eat meat, and if we do need the pigs for all these other vital resources, how do we care for them better and subsequently care for ourselves better. So I've been looking at ways to maybe consider that. And there's definitely some researchers out there who've thought about slaughterhouses and looked at human labor policy and how to make that better. But again, like, I think part of history is looking at continuity and change, and the things that remain the same are usually the most problematic. So there's like, do y'all know Upton Sinclair's book, The Jungle?
No.
The Jungle.
Upton Sinclair's The Jungle.
The Jungle.
Is it fictional or not?
It is fictional, actually, but based on fact.
Okay.
It was an expose, if you will, written in or published in 1906, but it was looking at the Chicago meatpacking industry and talking about just sounds like you're reading a sci-fi novel. But out of that...
Is it Soylent Green? Is that what we're reading?
What's that?
Soylent Green, the great Charlton Heston sci-fi novel about food, where...
You know what I recently also thought about? Margaret Atwood's Madame series. So Oryx and Crake is of one of that series. And she has like chicky nuggies and... is it Pooglies? It's like a pig-human combination. Anyway, it was written a while ago, but it's like super relevant.
But Sinclair's book on the meatpacking industry...
Going back, 1906. He wrote that to talk about the conditions, and so people took food safety out of that, which there were legitimate food safety concerns. But the other point he was trying to make were he was looking at a Lithuanian family that had immigrated. The only jobs they could get were in this certain meatpacking industry, which is true still across the world today. 70% of the world's slaughterhouse workers are migrant workers.
Yeah, right.
So there's an effect. It's called the Sinclair effect. But basically there's a direct correlation between domestic violence and slaughterhouse work. And so when you think about that, what bleeds out of the slaughterhouse is much
Really?
bigger than the meat that's packaged for you.
And that's almost a kind of metaphysical point around one's exposure to a particular type of violence, right? This is a very sanctioned violence of human to animal, which is normalized. And, you know, we don't at all have any contact with it when we go to a supermarket to get the packaged pork mince or something. So it's frightening to think of when you're at the coalface of actually beginning that food chain process that I'm very foreign to. There might be some flow into domestic violence through
Harsh realities. So I think...
Wow.
Bringing people's awareness to that, not in a way to minimize or steer them away from wanting to enact change, but it's much bigger than just how we care for animals inevitably impacts how we treat each other.
I think that's a really good point.
And from an Australian context, I think a lot about the legacies of wealthy countries and how that wealth came to be, and particularly around things like phosphate and all these precious minerals and mining, and it's everywhere in the news right now. When you devastate a country's resources, like Nauru, for instance, we mined 70% of their phosphates in the 60s, and there's like a list of 9 countries that are used in agricultural work in Australia, and a lot of those come from Nauru being but one example of places where we've desecrated the local landscape to extract things that we need in Australia, and then now use some of that work in remittance schemes and slaughterhouse work we're inviting you into the country, but it doesn't go back, you know. There's remittance.
And within these
you need
concerns...
it and you don't, but yeah.
Yeah, and because as you're mapping out within these concerns, there are questions of how we can see the future of pork, right? If we're highlighting these concerns, as you're saying, where do you see the future of pork going?
It feels very dystopian. I think a couple of years ago, they opened a 1.2 million capacity piggery in China. It's 23 stories.
A 23-story piggery.
23-story pig in the middle of a city.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
And it's just mass processing pigs.
Pigs.
It's a huge slaughterhouse. 23.
It's a huge slaughterhouse. A lot of it's automated, but we're not using their manure for anything productive. when you think about zoonotic diseases, they can jump species now. Things like COVID and, everything gets blamed on China for that particular disease, but the bird flu originated in the U.S. The bird flu that's going around right now, right?
That's devastating.
It's a species problem. It's a human problem. It's not a race or a nationality problem.
Yes. Yeah. So as you're saying, in terms of the future of consumption and production of livestock, we're seeing some really troubling previous practices that are now combining with globalization. And then as you're saying, this 23 level pig harvesting slaughterhouse. Wow, in the middle of a city.
In the middle of a city. And when I think what I hope will happen is that we go from seeing food not as a commodity but as a good again, as a human right. I think, it's hard to pinpoint exactly when it went from being a good to a commodity, but that shift is pervasive.
So by good, what would be an example of that category? Something which hasn't yet been changed into.
Or maybe good or resource, if we want to use commodity or resource. If we think about it as something that is finite, not as something that we can make more of indefinitely, like water is a resource, air is a resource, cobalt, phosphate.
Yeah, and certainly I think that takeaway of demonstrating some kindness in that equation rather than a kind of violence. I was going to say dehumanizing, but I guess it's the Anthropocene still, right? That I can't think outside of a human-centric explanation of judging the ethics and morality of that. And it's very tough talking cross-species to say, we're dehumanizing pigs. Well, they're not human. Well, what am I expressing there?
Yeah.
How do we teach kindness?
Yeah, and it gets, those stories we tell about them dehumanize. What is a human? We introduce human DNA into pigs so that we can grow organs and heart valves that are adaptable. And so I just think people are like, oh, well, I don't have a kidney need from a pig. And I'm like, but some people do. And like, if you care for this child that has kidney disease, if we think about that as an amazing resource, like what technology and science can do, that's incredible. If we can potentially use pig hearts where there's such a shortage in a human and it works well, but it matters. I would want a heart from a pig that had a good life.
Yeah. Look, and it was striking to hear about the diabetes, insulin linked to pigs. I had no idea that the history of insulin and diabetes weren't something synthetic or something about penicillin and mold. It was actually animal-based.
Yeah.
Wow. And I hadn't even thought about the use of pigs for replacement organs. Wow. Yeah.
So I guess through all of this, you asked a while ago what if I've noticed any cultural shifts, and pigs are demonized. The metaphors we use about pigs are really mostly problematic, but not oftentimes true, based in fact.
Because if you're seeing someone being a glutton, eating a lot of food, you call them a pig.
Yeah. Sweating like a pig. Pigs don't really sweat.
He's looking a bit porky.
Porky, yeah.
Yeah. Sweating like a pig goes back to pig iron. It refers to the smelting process of iron.
No way.
When it condenses and droplets form on the pig iron, which is the shape of the little bit of iron.
So it was the fact that iron, for some reason, was
Sweats.
referred to pig iron. That's crazy. And didn't help pigs at all.
Yeah. And maybe you would not call someone, say someone's sweating like a pig. You knew that it wasn't even, they're like, oh, you look like some iron. Well, thank you so much. What a compliment. Yeah.
I am an Iron Man. Yes. Yeah. Well, we're pretty much at time, Evelyn. This has been such a fascinating little entry point. If people want to find out more about the research and studies you're doing, where can they find you?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, hopefully I'll finish writing this thesis soon. I reckon if you just search pork problems and my name, there'll be some stuff that I've published that comes up. Yeah, and then stay tuned.
Excellent. Well, Evelyn Lambeth, absolute pleasure to have you on.
Thanks, Joel, for having me.
We'll post whatever links we can to the material you've mentioned. The what's the oink one?
Everything but the oink.
Everything but the oink. And some links you've had when I was trying to search something. You've had one paper published, probably some other research as well. And if they search you on UTAS and other spaces, they'll be able to dig up that great work. Well, good luck. You're in the home stretch, I guess, in your third year now. So fantastic stuff. And yeah, a lot to think about there.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. So keep listening now to Edge Radio. Coming up, we've got an Edge ID. Because there's never a song in the system when I'm going to play a song. But eventually there'll be music.
You're listening to Edge Radio.